Hi, welcome on. In this video, this is going to be part four of my video breakdown, responding to what Anti-Dog Trainers put out regarding the core ingredients that I talk about by way of influence and control, and again how certain trainers, how they reconcile, okay, those core ingredients by way of their approach, how they jump into a relationship problem. And I talk about this whole rush to get a dog off leash. And you're going to hear it here in the video again. I decided to do some more parts here because there's more here, okay, to talk through. Because that's what this is about. This is about talking through it so people understand the issues. When I talk about, why is it so often for dog owners to end up with a counterfeit picture change at the response level, while this is going to be marketed, as kind of like just trust the picture. But the question is, well, should you trust any picture that a dog owner is putting out based on, what I'm saying in terms of what represents a process, taking the path of an intervention, but how those core ingredients are properly reconciled to make sure that, again, coming out on the other side, that you have a predictable, intentional outcome that represents a real picture of change. And so again, when you see these trainers that are just like talking constantly, like this whole rush to get a dog off leash, and again, there's a reason why trainers say certain things, why they overly focus a certain way to put out a picture, which can look from a certain level. And I talk about the problem with appearances can look great, but the question is, what's the criteria to establish or assess that the picture is great? Okay, that you can trust responses that way. And this is we get into this whole thing with dogs moving around. Even the training environment can look fantastic as they're doing the sit down, come and stay, but then just in a moment, it seems like it comes out of nowhere. Someone gets bit, like something bad happens, and then it's like, what's going on? It just seems like a contradiction. You have dogs that are looking really good, with how they respond, but then in certain moments, but then seems like the relationship isn't actually getting better. And that's my point, in terms of what actually, creates a true picture of change. But it's about the right conversation through the method itself, okay, through those core ingredients being reconciled properly. And this is why, again, one of the objections from someone like the anti-dog trainer is like, where's Dale's off-leash dogs? Like, he keeps bringing that up, right? Where are they? But here's the thing to consider and think about, and I challenge people to consider is that if what I'm saying is true, okay, about what represents a foundation, okay, so when you go into my videos and watch my board and trains, I talk about this. I mean, this is the thing about these trainers, how they will take things out of context and they just ignore what I'm saying. I talk about the point where I start to move in the direction of off leash, at like say out of a 14-day board train process, right around day 12. Okay, you'll see commands start to have meaning. I'm starting to verbalize. Okay, I talk about how commands align through perceptions changing, those core ingredients, how they are reconciled, but how they change the perception of dogs the right way. Then you start to verbalize. But then even starting to move in the direction of off leash around day 12 and 13, you'll see it. But ask yourself the question, like the first 12 days, what's happening? Okay, it's a specific type of conversation through how I'm connected with the dog through the leash, how I'm interacting with the dog, the interplay of that, the dog coming into agreement with that type of, again, talk about a power play. It's a type of conversation the dog comes in agreement with. And so ask yourself the question, if that's the foundation, what typically is going to represent the majority of my videos, okay, going into a relationship problem, and oftentimes with an aggressive dog, how is that established? So what are you going to see? What's the majority of the video content you're going to see that my focus is going to be on? It's going to be that. It's not going to be off leash. Okay, you get there, but I don't care about off. See, that's not the thing. It's like, what's the point? I've mentioned this on another video. One of my, you go on my YouTube channel, talk about this. I could have a dog off leash in, less than 15 minutes, throwing treats around. I mean, think about that. I could have a dog off leash quickly, like these trainers, right? But knowing what I know and what actually creates a true picture of change, then what am I doing? It's a total sham. Okay, knowing what I know, it's like, why would I do that? Well, then it's an ethical, moral issue because I know that that is not the way to establish the right picture. Okay, that's not the way to approach a relationship problem. That's not the way to engage a relationship problem. Okay, so that's not what you're going to see. Okay, you're going to see what you see on my channel. And so these trainers that go on about off leash, off leash, off leash, that's their focus. But you ask the question, well, is that, knowing what you know, is that a good thing? Absolutely not. Okay, because that's the rush, right? It's like I want that Christmas postcard picture, but ask the question, how do you know it's a true picture change or a counterfeit? Right? So understand these trainers when they're talking, they're not dialed in that way. All right, that's why they keep going on certain ways, and they're playing into people's emotions too. It's like, if I'm a dog, hey, I want that. I want that picture. I want that dog off leash. I want that picture. Oh, here you go. But then, bad things happen and it's all over the place. Look at the dog training. And again, that's why I've done a whole series of videos on, the problem, right? But real problem is the dog training. When you have this many trainers who are marketing this, it seems, totally normal to blame dogs and get into this whole blame shifting narrative, right? Because that's where we're at, right? But that's not what this system of training is about. And that's not what my focus is on. So just put it out there about being real. That's why when I talk about these trainers taking things out of context, that's what they're doing, okay? That's why I'm doing these videos. I have a conversation, say, okay, let's talk about off leash and why it is that I do train the way that I do it. And I'm not rushing to generate a certain picture because I know the problems in that. Because these trainers, the criteria they're using isn't being administered, it isn't coming together the way I talk about. So I never would do it. But these trainers are doing the things that I would never do. And they're, because they're not going to walk it back. I mean, and they're not going to, obviously, again, they have the same opportunity that I have or had to ask the questions, to put everything to the test, to do it the way, but they don't want to do it, right? So why is that? I mean, you got to ask that because it's easy just to do this, I guess. I mean, they don't have that same type of mindset or type of ethics.
How are you, Nessie? Goose is doing great. James, I don't know if you're still here. Appreciate you joining, man. Paula, I don't know if you're still here. Nicole, everybody. Sorry, I was paying attention to what was going on in the store.
So again, say Goose is doing great, okay, but how do you assess that? Okay, what level? What's the current state of the relationship? Well, you get Goose on the leash in a very specific, intentional way. And again, I talk about the theme of intent. Got to line up the interactions. They got to speak the right language, and then I'll assess that. The level of agreeableness or disagreeableness, right? I'll assess it, right? And then it'll all make sense, right? Then we'll know, right? See, that's the real test. And Goose, so that's the only way. Goose is doing great. Well, based on what? Like, how do how these trainers assessing that? She's got to tie in properly.
But really appreciate everybody joining. And so my philosophy is this. Listen, getting a dog off leash.
Because that's what it is here. So he's just saying, oh, look at my off leash dog. Look at the picture, right? A lot of Zach George and all these other trainers, they all do the same. Balanced dog trainers, they'll do the same thing. I put a video, Sean O'Shea. Go watch it on my thing. And we get to the point of his assessment for change. The dog's off leash in the backyard, just jumping around. I talk about that. Well, what's that? Like, how do you assess change that way? Right. The right assessment is, the right conversation. Think of the interactions with the core ingredients reconcile as a conversation in close, so that exposes, right, the relationship. That forces the cards on the table. Then you'll know. It's no different here. It's just saying, just trust the picture.
is not a quick process.
So you're saying it's not a quick process?
Right, there's a bunch of steps that need to be taken to get a dog off leash.
What are they?
Right, it's something that needs to be earned. So you have to look for certain things in the mindset of the dog. Is the dog...
See, and so pay attention. So it's all generalized language. So when I talk about it, you don't have to guess. I don't use generalized language. I'm specific. Right? I'm specific. You'll see how I'm using the leash, how I'm interacting. I talk through everything. You watch my videos. There's nothing hidden. That's why the anti-dog trainer keeps talking about hidden. No, there's lots hidden here, okay? Because, because that's the point. It's almost this, and you see some of these, a lot of these trainers, they use generalized language. It's just like, because it's not, there's no depth anyway. So when I start to say certain things, and that's why they'll say, oh, I can't understand what Dale's saying, and he'll use the same Zach George-like language, for a reason, right? But I'm very specific as to what, going through a sequence. So there's no guesswork involved, and that's a good thing, okay? Because it's tangible. You can take a hold of it. Even when, I'm walking the dog, you'll see the dog's head turn inwards. I'm talking about certain moments, the role of influence, intercepting versus changing focus. So I'm very specific as to the role of control and influence, which is good. Okay, that's the point. There's so much confusion in the dog training world. That's why there's bad results all over the place in terms of a bad picture, because these trainers, they're not dialed in that way.
Dog is that leader-follower dynamic established to the level where it is ironclad.
So he uses all those words, right? Ironclad. It's like, okay, well, break that down. What does that mean? How do you get ironclad? What does that mean?
You know without a shadow of a doubt that the dog is following you, and everything is on your terms when you are outside, when the leash is on, right? Meaning you really don't even have to use the leash when you go out with your dog. Your dog just knows what the expectations are. And if you have to direct the dog doesn't fight you. There's no...
See, the dog doesn't fight. See, it's the same thing, but force-free trainers will say the same thing. That's why there's all this divisive back and forth in these groups. Force-free trainers say the same thing. Oh, you don't have to fight the dog. There's no conflict. There's no just trust what you see. It's the same stuff everywhere.
Power struggle. The dog isn't resisting you. Once all those...
So you talk about power struggle. So let's frame that up. So I talk about it's a power play. Once those core ingredients are aligned, the right conversation's happening, it is going to be a power play at a certain level, depending on, right, the current state of the relationship. Think of it like the more selfish a child is, the more pushback there's going to be. But you have to frame that up with the parenting style as well. That type of all the conversations have to be right, okay? Those interplays have to come together. The right parenting style, the authoritative parenting style, those dynamics have to align properly, okay, to get proper context to the power play. So he's talking about, there's no conflict power, but what's that based on? You edge towards bribery, especially for trainers bribing dogs, pulling treats out, right? Of course there's no conflict because it's all bribery based anyway, right? So it's just like, those themes I talk about, bribery, accommodation, negotiation. That releases that power play. That's the same thing's true here. Okay, if you don't bring it into what I show is defined, so because core ingredients being reconciled properly, you open the door up to off leash and just starting to let it go, right? Same thing. Oh, look, and you might have a little bit of a power play going on at a certain level, but again, you have to bring it to the right conversations. If it's released, okay, then that door is completely wide open for that dog holding a level of control in the relationship. It's very intentional here. Understand, it's like the conversation has to be right. Okay, it's got to come together. The integrity of the interactions of those core ingredients, the integrity has to hold. I talk about that even when you watch some of my videos. I talk about why it's got to hold together for a certain period of time. That's why going through, say, a 14-day board and train, it's got to hold together pretty, the integrity that's going to hold together, the structure and everything's going to hold together pretty defined up to like day 12. Like it's like, because then you get the right information, because you're going to get the right information, okay? Everything is designed to provide that. So there's no guesswork. Okay, here's just like the release part. Just I want because right, want to go off leash, off leash, off leash, off leash.
Those things are lined up. Then we can begin the process of getting the dog off leash. Now, I got Goose off leash in about a day and a half because she was already demonstrating all of those things to me.
So he got Goose off leash in a day and a half. Right? But ask yourself the question, if all his contention and all his disagreements and all his objections to, say, well, how I do, right? How I engage relationship problem. Well, this is the problem. Okay? You know that I wouldn't trust this picture as far as I could throw it. Right? Because it's the integrity of what I talk about isn't there. Because that's not his idea of things, right? And it is all this generalized language too. Oh, how do you know? Well, there's no generalized language in the system. It's specific, right? But that's why trainers like this have a problem with it, right? And so if you have a problem with it, then it's something else, right? It's the idea of things isn't the same at all. It's not. Okay, I did a whole series of videos on his method, and just look at it. So, but again, this whole thing with the rush to off leash, right?
Very, very quickly.
Very quickly.
So it was a matter of using that leash in a certain way that first day I had her, but everything was lining up pretty fast. Even though her foster had said she doesn't want to walk. Every time I try to bring her outside, she wants to run back in the house. And you could see the very first day that I met Goose at the adoption event, she didn't want to follow me. She didn't want to walk with me. She was.
So same thing with the following attack. I talk about the difference between, possessive attachment, right, and real connection through, again, being reconciled through relationship properly. Talk about leadership. So there's a difference there. But at what level is that? All those questions, because again, I keep going. I keep defaulting back to here's the process to assess it properly, but also to generate change. So, because everything here, you're just basing it off taking someone's word for it, because there is a way to know. So I'm going to stop it here for part 4. I'm going to do a couple more parts here, just for people that are interested. So again, because understand there is a specific process, okay? And not to focus just on this trainer that way, because again, this is information based. You apply this to anything, the criteria, whether it's drive-based, play-based, I go through all of it, because it comes down to the core tenet, like what's the jumping in point, and how those core ingredients, how they reconcile. See, that's the thing, and what type of, dynamics happen. I talk about power play. Well, yeah, it's going to be a power play. But it's the type of power play that makes sense to the dog, understands about intent. So it is a type of rapport. It's not like being seen as the enemy that way, where you're trying to just bring undue conflict into the equation. Okay, that's not what it's about. Okay, it's about making sense to the dog. Okay, so you might deal with, say, aggressive dogs. I'm kind of, being more kind of loosey-goosey, but the integrity of that's going to come together. See, it's always going to come together. I may keep it framed up a little differently because I don't want to generate, high challenging conflict, especially with dogs that are holding a very high level of control in the relationship. So it's about doing it smart too, but understand the method doesn't change. Okay, the integrity is still going to come together. For example, if I'm doing like an aggressive dog, I'll be more just routine focused, just loosey-goosey, just, it's that type of conversation, it's that type of establishing a rapport, okay, intent. The dog gets to know, hey, Dale's Dale, but it's after 2 or 3 days, the integrity is going to increase. It's going to align the way it does. Okay, it's going to hold together. And the muzzle may be part of it, so certain protocols are going to come into effect too. And then it's going to the same thing. It's a transition. It doesn't hold together forever like that, right? It's a process. It's a temporary process based on relationship change. Okay, it's about relationship change. Then come out the other side with a intentional outcome. So again, thanks for watching part 4. Okay, I'll be doing a part 5 here shortly.